And so we are surrounded by strong women. Can you tell? Welcome to Family Ministry Leadership Podcast. We are so delighted to have some of the most amazing women with us today. And so we are going to be focusing on, what are we going to be focusing on? Tell everybody.
Women in ministry and leadership.
Okay. All right. Would you introduce everybody, please?
Well, first, I'd like to introduce the lovely Jane Curtis, who her and her husband, Charles, pastor at Southview.
Come on.
And right next to her is the lovely Rachel Youngblood, and her husband also pastor with us at Southview. So right. These two are amazing women. Yes. And then we have actually my sister, Tina Pajic, who's single. She is single, ready to mingle.
Wow, we went right for that, right into it.
Just the plug. Let's just put it out there.
Wow.
She leads and helps in our children's ministry. And then we have our lovely worship director, Pastor Katherine Huskey. So these are all women who lead in our church, and we're excited to hear from them.
Good. And so all you know that LeeAnn is also a pastor here at Southview. She and I started this church 10 years ago, but one of the things that we find in ministry, and I want to just get right into it because I've invited you here for a reason, not because we're obviously we don't have enough microphones for this, but we needed each one of you here because today I want to ask you about women in ministry and this stigma that thinks that is a male-driven kind of profession, that men can only lead in church. And we know at Southview, one of the things that we've seen is so many strong women that come in and are forces to be reckoned with at our church. Every one of you have a main role at our church. You all function, and as I believe, as leaders, as pastors. And so today, I want to just go right there. I want this to be an opportunity for us to talk off the cuff. Everybody good with that?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay, so here's my question to you. And this is, I can't answer this, so I'm going to direct it to you, ladies, and you can as well address this. What are some of the hurdles today in ministry for women? Who wants to take that?
I feel like it's so loaded.
And usually the first person that talks has to begin.
Oh.
There you go.
I mean, I still think that in some ways we're overcoming like the stereotype of what you said. Like, I think too that like in some communities it's still hard for men to be led by women.
Yeah.
And so I think even having a culture at Southview where women are in leadership, I think, people become more attuned to that. But I still think that there are elements where you'll go places and you'll say like, I'm a leader in my church, and people still think that means you lead the children's ministry. Right. So I do think there is some sort of like archaic idea of what that means still, and I think we're in a society now where women are so strong that that's being changed, but at the same time church is still sort of dated, and so people still don't really think of women as pastors the same way as they think of men.
That's good.
Identity, I believe, is really a part of that for both the men and the women.
Okay.
So the more identified you are in the Lord, the better off everyone is.
Yeah.
I just believe it's just very simple in that what I've seen here at Southview is an identity in Christ that is strong. So when you can have a true identity in Christ, then you're not concerned about whether or not someone's going to take your spot.
Come on.
Because that's a real big place for everyone. Everyone wants to have a fit. They want to have a place. But when you know that God's giving you the place, then everything aligns well.
So I'm gonna just kind of jump on that and say that we can find that sometimes men can be threatened by women, especially strong women. Right. And so they have a tendency to kind of shrink back and say, women, this is not your place. Right. And it's really being threatened when you feel that, when you say that?
Yeah, by men and all other women
Yeah,
as well.
absolutely.
I feel that way.
Yeah.
And I find with myself, there's like this balance between being strong and being humble, because I want to be a strong woman in leadership, but I don't want to overpower your role either. I want to know my position in the leadership role. Not to say that I can't lead and I can't do this, but I know for some of the women, it's like power to the women, which I'm all about power to the women, but I'm also about knowing our place too.
Exactly.
So I think it's a balance.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I think the problem is what you're talking about is when a strong woman has no opportunity then she ends up trying to find other ways. And usually that comes out in negative ways.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have a good setup like we do, where women are considered able to be in the ministry, not a problem,
Right.
you're not going to have those issues.
Right.
And the issues are either they go around the back door and often cause trouble, or they try to,
Yeah.
like LeeAnn said, just strong arm and push their way in.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I've seen both.
Right,
You know,
right.
in all my years of ministry, I've seen
Right.
it happen both ways, and it always turns out bad. So actually, not allowing women to have power in a ability to minister in what their gifts and calling is actually causes more problems.
Wow.
Yeah, that's good.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's
You,
good.
you have to be able to work with the men, like
Right,
together. The
right.
unity is so
Exactly.
important. Like, or else God would have just created women or
Right,
just created man.
right,
You know. So
right.
from the beginning, like God intended us to work together and to,
Right.
to have
Exactly.
a mission together.
Exactly.
And so without honoring both
Right.
sides of that, like
Right.
we're failing
Right.
as
Yeah.
ministers.
Right.
Right.
You know, one of the things that LeeAnn and I really have been very intentional about is empowering like couples together.
Right.
And so when we look at someone like, for example, Pastor Eddie, when he was on board here and he was a single, and we saw the potential in him, but when you guys started dating and then eventually got married, we knew that you had ministry in you as well. So it wasn't like, well, Pastor Eddie's the pastor and you're just kind of take a back seat, but it was like, okay, Rachel, you're now a leader, you're a pastor in this place as well. And I think sometimes we have this tendency in churches today where we want to give one person in the marriage the authority to say you're a leader, but the other one's not. And what we found is when you're married, you're one flesh. You get both. So like if she's not on board with me, it's going to affect my ministry.
Right.
But on the
Right.
same aspect, I want to address this because although we're all in leadership here at Southview, we're all very diverse as well. Because Tina, I don't want to single out the singles.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So can
Yeah.
you just share a little bit about what it's like to be a single woman in a church and leading?
Yeah, so I think it definitely becomes where you as a single woman feel a little bit like you don't have a place, especially when you hit that 30 and up mark.
Yeah, yeah.
And everything's geared towards family.
Right.
You're trying to figure out, well, what's my role, what's my place? And I think there has to be a balance of like, well, we are all about family and I'm all about family, but what can I do to partake where I don't feel left out, but I feel actually like I'm running with the same cause that the church has in place. So there is a balance there to not seclude yourself, because I think single women tend to just back off like, well, that's for married people, that's for married women. I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna partake in the women's ministry because they talk about family and kids, and I don't understand that. But at the same time, there's so much to gain
Exactly.
from
Exactly.
being included on those things.
Exactly.
So there's definitely a balance.
What do we need to do as a church? What does the church need to do to remember that it isn't? Because here's what I see. It seems to be like a tendency where you have a church that's primarily young singles, and then you have a church that primarily married families, and then you have a church that's kind of older people, and it seems to be like that seems to be the tendency because it's easier to address a group.
Sure.
But when you want to create a church full of generations, you have to be able to make sure that everyone feels like they can come to the table. So
Yeah.
specifically with women that are single, what are some ways that we can as a church include you to know that you feel like you're part of this?
Well, I think the whole responsibility doesn't fall on the church. I think as single women, we have to take responsibility that God didn't create a church divided. There's nowhere in the Bible that
So
says
good.
like single women need their own platform.
Come on.
So I do think part of the responsibility is on us just saying like, this is just my season in life and I have to embrace where I'm
Amen.
at and just move forward.
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of it. And then I think the other part is the church does need to recognize, especially in our culture right now, there's so many more single people who are older. And so just really
That's good.
encouraging
That's
them
true.
to step up into a leadership role that you don't have to wait until you're married to
Right.
have a
right.
platform or to do something. Just
Right.
step in and do what you're called to
Exactly.
do. And I think when I was in my 20s, that was a big thing of girls my age being like, well, when I get married, then, when I get married, then. And it's,
Right.
we've had to come to a place where I think there's more women realizing, no, I don't have to wait till I'm married to step into what God has for me.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
I do think it's coming together. The church has to see it, but also singles have to let go of what feels intimidating, because it does feel intimidating walking into a very family-oriented environment, what the church is. But we have to step up.
So
and
good.
So that's kind of where I feel like my role is right now in the church, is showing other single women, like, step up, just do what you're called to do, and the rest will fall in place.
All right.
That's so good. I was just want to say
Good.
also, like, when I was single in 30s and leading, the challenge also is if people would just come and affirm and encourage, and women really truly benefit from hearing words. That was from the beginning with Adam and Eve.
Right.
So just being a person who's also coming alongside and encouraging and saying, I see the gifting that's in you, or I love what you're doing in this season that you're in, because that is so needed and something I think is few and far between. I remember having some people in my life that were constantly doing that, but there were some other people who weren't necessarily walking in their gifting yet, and they needed that. They needed that person. They needed those people to come alongside and be very intentional about pulling them out and saying, you can do this, you can do this.
And I think that too is where the single women have to take that response, because there's so many what's the word, like hurt there. There's so much hurt there because they want to be married so bad. So then a married person says something to be encouraging, and the single woman takes it as like, well, what, they don't think I can do this. So I think we have to get back to that balance of, like, we need that encouragement, and we have to let go of those feelings and be vulnerable in our singleness. So
and I think it's just taking hold of, like, who you are now, and doing what you can with, like, what God's given you now, and knowing that it doesn't disqualify you regardless of your marital status. And I think, like, what you're saying, like, women are, and I felt the same way when I was single. Like, I was waiting to sort of be validated by my marriage in order to, like, be the leader that I was meant to be. And unfortunately, I do think there is some of that stigma sometimes that, like, you know, until you're married, like, you're unstable. Like, you could be like, because what if you start dating someone and we receive them and then you break up, and then there's that like tension of what that looks like for everybody involved and you being a leader. And so I do think that there's some elements of that, but that's just life. Like, you know, part of being a leader is seeing someone be consistent in and out of season. And so I think whether or not you're single or dating or married, like, I think that God can use you where you're at. And if you just bloom where you're planted, God will promote you. God will put you in the place that you that you need to be, you know, and you don't have to worry about who God has placed you with. If you're just walking with God, He's going to take care of it. So
You know, I want to say this first and foremost, that every one of you, especially those of you that are married, you're all amazing leaders, but you also may affirm your husband, and you like, and this is the place, I think, and maybe we could talk a little bit about this, is like where you come in, because I can't explain the role like that you have, because I'm definitely a strong leader, but you're a strong leader. So, but there's also this place where women can come and support their husband, which you guys do, but then you also walk in a role of leader. So how do you balance that delicately so that, you know, hey, I'm here to support Pastor Eddie. Hey, I'm here to support Pastor Charles. Here to support Austin. But then at some place you also know, hey, I'm a leader, because I see that in you. You guys run with leadership. So what is that? Maybe some people need to know, like, when do I step into my role? When do I support my husband? What does that look like? Can we talk about that?
I think though, when you support what your husband is and who he is and what he does, it should come back on you, and it will open the door for you to have more opportunity if it's done right. Good. It's not like I just have to be there behind him and make sure he's the man of God he is, and keep telling him he's doing a good job, you know, and he's great and he's wonderful. Yes, you want to do all of that, but when he is secure and knows who he is in God, which we can help him be that, then you are given more opportunity to become who you are, because then he's not he doesn't need to find that any other place. I mean, he needs
Right.
to find it from God, but you
Yeah.
are definitely part of that.
Yeah.
That's so good.
You know, and
Yeah.
I just don't think, personally, I don't think there's a man in the world, in the ministry, that doesn't need his wife to tell him that he's doing a good
Come
job.
Yeah.
on.
I just think
I
it's the
agree.
way people were created.
Yeah.
God
Yeah.
made it that way.
Exactly.
You know, and we
So
need to
good.
hear it too.
Exactly.
But for some reason, a man needs to think, no, his wife is proud of him.
Yeah.
So
He
good.
just needs to know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
good.
Not that we can't tell him.
I'm gonna say amen to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just-
I know he needs that, and
I
know
don't know
most.
a man that doesn't
Exactly.
need it. I really
So
don't.
I agree.
never know a man who's created that doesn't want his wife to know and think and believe that he
Yep.
is doing a good job.
Yeah.
Yet be able to tell him,
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
And then I see that work in reverse,
Yes, it
and then
comes
he
back,
he
right.
fills me up and
Yes.
tells
Yeah.
me
right,
what
exactly.
he believes in me,
Yes.
who he
Then
says that I am.
right,
Yeah.
because he knows
Yeah.
who he is then, and then
Uh-huh.
he is able to release
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
you know?
And I think knowing who you are, like I know who I am, so I know how to affirm him and know where I need to lead.
Right,
You know, like I
right.
know where
Yeah.
my role is.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know what to take and what not to take. I know
Right.
when to step in and when to step out because I just know that. And I think that's a big part of being a leader and being in ministry. You know, I know where I'm needed.
Yeah.
You know, not where
Yeah.
I'm wanted, but where I'm needed, you know,
Really
because
what
that's
God, where
different.
God is calling you to do.
Exactly.
And you don't need to do things that God isn't calling you to do.
Exactly.
Right.
Right.
'Cause
And
it's
you
not
have to put the relationship first, like your relationship with God and then your relationship with your husband.
Right.
And I think like when we came into ministry, like Austin and I had just gotten married, like not shortly before that. And I remember us having a conversation that said like, essentially, if this ever becomes more important than our relationship, then we have to step away because it's not worth that
Yeah, yeah.
brokenness, you know? And I think like what you're saying, like to piggyback onto that, like you have to be, if you are working towards the health of your relationship, the ministry will flow out of that.
That's right.
And if that's not working, then that ministry will not be healthy outside of that marriage.
Right.
So, and I think
Come on.
like in order to really edify your relationship and your spouse, you have to be doing that with the Lord. Like it all trickles from that, you know?
Sure. Absolutely.
That's where he set it up, right? It was God,
Right.
your spouse, and then the church.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times in ministry, it's God, the church, then your family.
Right.
And that's why there's a breakdown.
Yeah.
It's the ministry.
Yeah, it's
that's
true.
Which is really
Yeah.
dangerous.
I heard this pastor talk about how God created Adam and then he created Eve and then he gave them the mission to fill the earth and that like whenever we get that out of order, like everything goes
Yeah,
crazy,
for sure,
you know?
for sure.
Because that's
For
the way
sure.
that God
That's great.
intended
yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So good.
Submission comes to mind. It's a word that many people are running from.
Yeah.
But
Come
if
on.
we don't have that, that's something that God is ordering and really charging the women to do, specifically with their husbands.
Yeah.
If we don't have that, because if we don't have it first with the Lord, if we don't have the submission first to the Lord, if we're constantly running and trying to do our own thing without submitting to God, it's going to be very challenging to then submit to what your husband is wanting and
right.
needing.
Yeah.
And many times we have to remember to die to self
Come on.
in order for us to be those kind of people that they need to have. They're good helpmates. We need to be able to die to self in order for that beautiful picture that God designed by putting us together to really come to light, to really just
true.
be so
Good.
fruitful.
Yeah.
So I know it is a challenge. I hear that so often with so many people, married and single. Submission is huge. But if I could say anything to a single person, it would be understand that now. Understand that your submission to God is so important. And if you
Good.
get that, it'll carry you because
Good.
that never changes.
Yeah.
Your husband comes in, that's a beautiful addition,
Yeah.
but that never changes
Exactly.
the submission to God.
I
Yeah.
heard
Come on.
we did a study with Lisa Bevere, and she did the whole submission thing. And actually, if you break it down, sub means under,
Yeah.
and mission. So really,
Yeah, come on.
when I submit to him, we become under the same
Yeah.
mission.
It's so
And
good.
it's not that I'm
So good.
No.
beneath.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, but we're together, we're under the same
Right.
mission.
Right.
And I'm always, if we're on the same page, it's not a lesser thing or
Right.
a I feel suppressed coming under him. I willingly do it because I know he has all the interests, my best interests in hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think if you're led by a good leader or a
Yes.
good
Yeah.
husband
Yes.
or a good pastor or a
Yes.
good whatever,
Yes.
you will submit.
Exactly.
You will come under. So
Well, that's good. Listen, I'm just going to remind anybody that's watching this. These are not women that are role players. These are leadership women. So when you say that, that really shows me your heart, because like when I look at you and you say the word submission, Rachel, but I know that you're a strong leader. That really speaks to me, because honestly, as a man, you know, I can never come to LeeAnn and go, you need to submit to me, woman. Like, I mean, that's kind of the stereotype of a man and a woman. But I feel like my greatest aspect is to build you up. Here's how I look at women, or I should say my woman, not women, because you guys all have your own. But my wife in particular is, I'm always better off when she's healthy, leading,
Yeah.
strong.
Yeah.
And there is this idea like, you know, you're here to serve me, but honestly, like when she's doing it and she's killing it, I'm killing it.
Yeah.
Like, and I
Yeah.
just feel like we have to get this idea, and you've all touched on that we're partnering with that.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I love what you said to a single person. Like, we have to get this revelation now.
Yeah.
Because then you'll pick someone differently.
It's
Because
true.
you're going to look for someone that's going to edify you, not put you
Yeah.
under their
Yeah.
mission.
Yeah.
But that you come together. I love that.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that, man.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
something I'm picking up from what all of you were saying, but you said it, is knowing who you are.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you can't find that when you're single,
Right,
now
right.
knowing who you
Right.
are, and you're gonna look for that in
Right,
a spouse,
right.
then that just is
Right.
Yeah.
disaster waiting
Right.
to happen.
Right.
So
Right.
I think as single women, it's important to make sure we're getting in the Word and allowing God to
Exactly.
tell us who we
Oh my
are,
goodness, yes.
and not picking it up from
Good.
Yes.
culture
Yes.
or from
Yeah.
someone else, but
Yes.
knowing like
Right.
this is who I am. And I think that helps too as single women when you're dating. You're gonna
Yes.
go and in a relationship and start dating someone, and you're gonna realize pretty quickly this is not someone
Yeah.
that I'm
Right.
called to be with,
Right.
and it just makes you healthier.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
Yeah.
yeah.
I think
We all forget that second part of that verse. Wives submit themselves to their husbands. And then it goes on to say the
Husbands.
husbands, you know,
Lay down
They're
your
lay
life.
down your life and serve, you know, as Christ served. And I'll
Yes.
tell you, when your husband is Christ-like and serves you,
Yes,
it's
it's
way
easy.
easier.
Exactly.
It's like,
it's so
sure.
Yes.
You're there to
Absolutely.
help me. You're serving
Absolutely.
me. You're, like you just said, you're thinking about me. If you know, it comes to a decision, and you know, we need to make a big decision, and we disagree, or you know, one of us has a strong. Usually, I'm like, okay, I'll defer because I know
Yeah.
how
Right.
you have been.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have my best
You have
interest.
my
in
Right.
best.
Right.
If you're really feeling this from God
Yes. Yes.
That's
Yeah.
good.
most of the time.
yeah. Yeah.
A couple of times anyway. was right.
Can you talk in the mic for Pastor Charles to hear what you just said?
Oh my gosh.
Man, this is so
Sometimes
good.
I know. I just know I'm right.
So good. I want to go a little deeper if we can. Can we get into some deep stuff here?
Yeah.
Okay. So when we talk about these things in the culture, what are, and man, I want to hear your voices on this. What are some things, and listen, let me just say this, just those cameras that you're watching here, I've told them be free and talk, even if you have to address some issues at Southview. Like Southview's not perfect, so just be gentle because I'm here and I don't want to be. But what I want you to do is, can you tell me? Maybe all of us weigh in on this. Is what are some practical things that the church can do to help fix this? Whether it's culturally, whether it's just this gender thing, whatever this is, to make women step into the role that God has called them, so that the church can lead on all cylinders. What are some practical steps?
I think the number one thing that you do is you continue to put LeeAnn to the front.
Sure.
And that opens up the door for other women.
Yeah.
So, and that's huge. You know, without making, there's some people that do that and they make it like almost so obvious and so almost, I don't want to say obnoxious, but they're just like, my wife,
Right.
you know, and it's just, it's like, you know, but you just put it in a very natural way that she's just part, and you honor her in front of the church and give her a platform. And she just is herself. She's not trying to be you. She's not trying to be anybody else, you know? So that's healthy. I think that's really healthy. And that works well. I think that works well in the church. I'm sure there's other ways, but for me that works
Good.
Yeah.
really well.
And I feel that about myself too. Like I feel like if I can just be who I am,
Right.
and just do what I feel the Lord's telling me to do,
Right.
it affects everybody else.
Yeah.
Like in a positive way. They
Right.
know,
Yeah.
like it's nice to hear you say that, because that's what I want to give off. Like I'm just doing what God calls me. I'm not trying to be him. I'm not trying to be this pastor wife thing. I'm just being who I am. And
Yeah.
that, I think, affects the women in the church
Yeah.
and the women in the community.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, I think you have to look at the individual and treat everything individually, because I think the moment that you go like, okay, well, we need a black woman to do this so that we're filling
Right.
that, and everyone sees that we're cultured, or everyone sees, I mean, that's defeating the entire purpose, because the heart behind it
Wow,
isn't
come on.
changed.
Right.
And so really it has to be
Come on.
like, is
Yeah,
this the
it's good.
person that God has qualified
Right,
and
right.
called to be in
Right.
this position?
Right.
And is God leading them to us
That's
to
good.
open the door and
Right.
give them the platform
Right.
to lead?
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think unless you address everything individually, like there really can't be a change, because you're just perpetuating the issue by falling in line with stereotypical thinking.
So enough of the women preaching on Mother's Day, right? Is that what you're saying? Like no more of this.
I just think
I'm just kidding.
that the church is has the ability to be so much more creative than that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Like, because God's so creative, and I don't think. I mean, I just think gone are the days that everything has to look like cookie cutter and in a box, because
Yeah.
that's not God.
Yep.
And so I think we have the ability to do so much more. You know, I would love to hear from like a single dad on Mother's Day. Like, I think that would be so
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Like, and that's
Seriously.
not to say that what women do isn't important. We shouldn't honor mothers. I just think that like we're honoring women because they're women, not because they're moms.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
right.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I and that's like actually something when you sent us questions, I thought there's been times that I felt disqualified just because I'm not a mom. And that's before we even were like thinking
Yeah,
about having
yeah,
kids.
yeah.
Just the
Yeah.
idea that like we were just young single married people,
Yeah.
and people would be like, well, when you have children you'll understand.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And
right.
so I feel like even in that, like we just have to treat people as individuals.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah.
who are they before me and before God? You know, not
Exactly.
what qualifies them
Yeah.
Yeah.
in their status.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
see that everybody
That's good.
struggles with that. Because
Exactly.
There could be like, I know in the beginning I saw myself as not old enough to lead older women or
Totally.
older. So there's always a stereotype, but I think it goes back to what you said earlier was championing the women.
Yeah.
I think if we can champion
Come on.
each other
Come on.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
celebrate
Absolutely.
our
Yeah.
singleness,
Yeah.
our motherhood,
Yeah.
whatever it may be, and just kind of push them into that, I think we'll succeed then.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
that's when we'll see a change, when we can embrace like everybody for who they are.
Right.
Yeah.
Everybody's
So good.
identity.
So
and,
good.
and we don't have to put, yeah, I might be a mom, but I'm a woman.
Right.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, whatever it may
Yeah,
be. I'm
yeah.
a woman
Yeah.
and a person.
Right.
When you
right.
strip it all away, I'm just
Exactly.
like I'm just
Right.
like all
Yeah.
four of
I
you.
feel like
Yeah.
there's a Beyonce song getting ready to come out of this thing. Tina, what do you got?
I just think it's important to realize too, like there is a difference in being, especially single women. What I tend to notice is like they start to take on a masculinity. Like they have to feel like they're so strong and so like,
Yeah.
well, I'm gonna show everybody I can do this
Wow.
and I don't need a man.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
there's hurt there from
Yeah.
past relationships, and then things happen. And I think with all the stuff that happens culturally right now,
Right.
like single women start to tend to feel like, well, if I'm more overpowering, if
Yeah.
I show them
Yeah.
like I can do this without a man, I think we lose what we're really called to do.
Right.
Which
Yeah.
I think even as a single woman, you can call forth something in men, whether they're single or married,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
where we need them. We
Yeah.
can't do this without them.
Right.
So
Right.
I think that's a big thing that I'm noticing with single women is it's starting to take on a role of like, well, I'm going to be a leader in the church, but I have to take on like the man's part. And I think
Yeah.
it's kind of gone backwards whether you're married or single. I am noticing that in the church as women are starting to take over, whether I don't know if that's because men have not taken over and they're not stepping up as much. I know that's a problem that we see with single men lately, that we don't see as many men in leadership roles that are single for whatever the reason is. And so that's why I feel like certain single women like myself, just you kind of step forward, but I'm learning the balance of like step forward in my feminism and not take over like a masculine demanding
That's good.
demeanor.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the key really, is being who you're called to be and embracing it. And Rachel, you set that off from the beginning when you talked about identity.
Yeah.
What are some things you're seeing in the church that we can do a better job?
I really believe if it's a heart matter.
Heart.
I really believe as we lay our heart to the Lord and really want to change.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes we have the pride in the way. We hold on to things so much that we're not even willing to allow for God to move and do what He wants to do in a great way.
Right.
And I believe that one of the things is just really just sitting and understanding what love is. What does that mean? And really dissecting that, because if we truly understand and remember that God loved us, really loved us, in all of our ridiculousness, in those moments when we forget about Him,
Right.
then we can really extend that to other people.
Yeah.
But we live in an environment that is full of a lot of selfishness, and it does not produce fruit. So when we can really be selfless and we can really understand what God's message is, and it's through the heart. He's wanting to connect us all back to Him and wanting to spread out to one another. If we can understand that and champion one another and really, I agree with that so much, and really just say, I don't have all of the answers. I don't know everything.
Right.
And I actually want to grow. I
Right.
want to get to know you.
Right.
Then we could actually be better off.
Right.
I really believe that as a church.
Right.
I really believe that if we wanted to get to know each other, if we wanted to take time, we could see that, oh, wow, I didn't know that you did this beyond worshiping. I didn't know that you actually care about people, you counsel with people, and, just really understanding more about one another can really set off helping other women understand my place.
Right.
I'm valued here.
It's good.
I even think that sometimes as women, like, we can demand a place of leadership when really like God's calling us to just serve what's already happening. And I think then it's like there's such a fine line of this, like, the idea of like strong female women is like, well, everyone deserves a place, and that's true. But sometimes God's calling you to just serve what's already happening. And like I said earlier, God will always promote you to the place that you need to be. And I think that sometimes in church leadership with women start to get like empowered, and then they're like, well, I gotta do my own ministry. And maybe you do, maybe that is what God is saying, but also like then God will open the door for you. And so I think there is everything comes back to identity, knowing what God's saying about you, knowing what God's saying for you, and then just being obedient to walk in that.
So good. Well, listen, I'm going to say this as a pastor that I'm learning as we're developing this church, is that when I see the gifts that you all carry, it's foolish for me not to use you. It's foolish for me not to hand you a mic. It's foolish for me to not sit around a table and say, what do we need to do better? Every one of you carry a talent and a gift. And I've learned this with LeeAnn years ago when we were doing ministry, and such a very wise person told me in the beginning stages, because we were doing this in our living room, and they said, don't force LeeAnn to be anything she's not ready to be. And for years, you were just a mom, and it was okay. And I was just doing it. But there was something, and I remember this, we've talked about this, where we got together with our pastors, and they called out the destiny in you. She's a strong pastor, Pastor Kathleen. And when we came back from that trip, you were changed. And I knew that LeeAnn had embraced the role. I remember talking to her one day, and I looked her in the eye and said, if you're not willing to do this, if this isn't something you want to do, this church, I'll shut it down, because I can't do this. A house divided against itself can't stand. But so something shifted in you. Can you put that into words, what that was?
Well, it was the identity thing, because pastors' wives have a stigma to them that I didn't want that. I want nothing to do with that title and what they are supposed to be. And so I struggled with embracing it because I just wasn't into it. So, but after that trip and I was poured into, and God gave me revelation, I realized and the Holy Spirit told me, I didn't ask you to be that.
Come on.
Right. That's
And
right.
so I was like, yeah, you're right. I was putting that on myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I realized I could be who I am called to be, who God made me to be,
Right.
and still fill a role that the world has deemed.
Right.
And so ever since then, I'm like, I'm recreating what the pastor wife looked like. I was on a mission.
Good.
Like, it doesn't have to look that way.
Good.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so ever since then, I've embraced it, and I realized I actually like doing this.
Yeah.
So it's
Good.
it's
Yeah.
it's
Right,
awesome when you
exactly.
do
That's
find
good.
identity in who you are as a woman. You realize you do things you really never thought you wanted to do,
Yeah.
or you were even qualified for.
Thought you
Wow.
were.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think the key with this, from what I'm getting from you ladies, is really we have to resist these labels that the
Right.
the culture gives us.
Yeah.
Whether you're black, you're white, you're Asian, you're single, you're married, you're single, you're married without kids, you're married with kids, whatever those stereotypes are, and we have to look at each other as people, as
Right.
ministers of the gospel. We're called, and it's so funny, the Great Commission says, go into all the earth and preach the gospel. It doesn't say go men, go women without kids, go single women. It's like everyone's called to go, yet we try to tell each other how they can go.
Right.
And I'm wondering if the church, if we get this, if we can unlock something greater than just the church running on all cylinders, but actually an attractive model to the world. Because we have the Me Too movement, and we have this racism that's in our culture, and all these things. And if the church can get this and model this, we can actually be a place of healing for
Yeah.
all of those things.
Exactly.
So when I think about what we're saying here, I know this is the beginning. I mean, obviously, we can talk about this for a long time. But I want to go around here and end this. I want to give you each an opportunity to share your parting thought. Like, what would you say to a woman today to empower them in ministry? What would be something you'd say? Jane, I want to start with you. And Jane, you're coming from a long time of ministry, a global ministry. So, like, what would you say to women, not just in the United States, but...
I would always tell a woman to put their relationship with God first. Nothing flows in your life without that.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you're a pastor's wife, if you're
Right.
a single woman,
Right.
if you've got to feel like you've got a preaching ministry or you've just got a servant behind the scene ministry. If it's not flowing out of your own personal life with God,
Right.
and it's not an outcrop of that,
Yeah.
it's like Jesus said, I can do nothing of myself. We're just
Right.
working in our flesh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
good.
so it's kind of summing up what we've
Yep.
been saying over
Yep.
and over again.
Yep.
Knowing the Lord, having a relationship with Him, and knowing who I am in Him, my identity, and then letting Him, and I think letting Him tell me what to do. But
Yeah,
as
yeah.
we do, and we talk about this, we just do one thing that God told us to do, and then we do the next, and we do the next, and then all of a sudden it's ministry. It's just being obedient.
Yes.
in the
Make it so
small things.
simple.
Right.
It's
Yes.
simple. It really
Yeah.
is.
That's good.
And not letting anyone force me into something less or force me into something more.
Come on.
Right,
You
right.
know?
That's good.
But and believing, like the Bible says, that a man's gift, a woman's gift, makes room for them. If you've got a gift, you've got a calling.
Exactly.
From God.
Exactly.
He's the one that has to open the door. Now, there's occasions that you might want to go to leadership and say, "Listen, I feel this from God, and I feel like I'm supposed to do this." But again, you have to bring that before your leaders, and they might say, "Hey, we don't see that,"
Yeah.
or "There's no place for that," and then you have to be able to deal with that.
Yeah.
But mostly believing, if I'm faithful and I'm serving God and I know God and I'm walking with God and I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, then God's going to open doors for me to do
Yeah.
everything
Yeah.
I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
And be contented until those doors open, or if they close, then knowing it's not God.
Yeah.
So
Amen.
yeah,
Good.
that's what I say.
Who else?
Definitely listen. And in that, just also remembering what God says to women about listening and not talking as much.
Wow.
I think it is extremely, and when we are speaking, using the words that He wants us to speak, because women have that dynamic voice, using it properly is so important.
So good.
I know also that it's important to serve. Don't ever lose sight of serving, because
Yeah.
remember who created you. Remember that it's God that's stamping you, and his example is servitude.
That's right.
Serving is such a key element. Serving him, not looking for man to celebrate you,
That's right.
not looking for
Yeah.
anyone else to say that you are identified,
Yeah.
but that he is the one that has stamped you. He's the one that created you, and
Yeah.
not forgetting that. And really looking at women and understanding in the scripture, looking that God has always used women for
That's right.
greatness.
That's right.
And you do not have to think of yourself as anything less than who God has
good.
made you.
That's right.
And that it's important to have a mentor. It's important to have other
That's
women in ministry
Yeah.
that you come to and have a safe place with, and can say, I'm bouncing this off of you. I need the reminders. I need the help. I need you to come alongside with me. Remind me that I need a praise break. There's some times when if you don't do anything else but just stop and praise Jesus,
Amen.
and just remember that you've
on.
got to just pray and
Yeah.
thank him.
Yeah.
Let that be off of our lips, that we're thanking the Lord
right.
for his goodness. It shifts everything, and
Yeah.
it puts us in a place of alignment
Yes.
that allows us to remember who we are, especially, for our husbands, especially in those moments when it might seem like, oh, I have to submit. Then remembering who I submit to, remembering that if he's hearing from the Lord, then I'm going to the Lord. I don't have to, always just go to him and know that things are going to get changed. If he's really hearing from the Lord, he can hear on his time.
Yeah.
He can hear in his devotional and his moment of praising
Yeah.
as well.
Great.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Who else? Parting thoughts.
I think like where the word says, ask for wisdom. It's the best
Yeah.
thing
Amen.
you can ask
Amen.
for. So continuing to ask
Amen.
for wisdom every day and surrounding yourself with
Yeah.
women
Yeah.
like you guys. Like I'm single, but I learned so much even just in this. I'm like, wow, this is incredible that I get to hear all of
Yeah,
this stuff.
so
But I feel like single women miss out on that because they're trying to separate themselves
Yeah.
and do something
Yeah.
different. So looking for women that have wisdom
Yes.
to surround
So good.
yourself
So
with,
good.
that are in leadership, that you can learn from, so that when your husband does come along,
Right.
you just kind of elevate yourself,
That's good.
elevate yourself even more than where you
good.
were.
Certainly.
And to learn to be content, but not complacent.
Yeah.
I think that's the big
come
thing I'm
on.
learning this
Yeah.
year is like be content where I'm
Yeah.
at.
Right,
You know,
right,
where the
right.
Bible talks about with little or with much,
Right.
being
Exactly.
content, but don't be complacent. Run after the
That's
things of
good.
God. Like
Amen.
run after your dreams. Don't wait for your husband. Just run
good.
and
Yeah.
do the things
Amen.
that God has called
Amen.
you to do, and you're gonna feel fulfilled along the
good.
way.
Yeah.
Great.
So good.
Mic drop.
Come on. Drop the mic.
I think if I was like telling people, like I would encourage you to do this if you're a woman like interested in ministry
Yeah.
or in ministry, is like always pursue healing.
Amen.
Like keep
Come on.
pursuing a
Good.
whole heart, because
Amen.
out of
Yeah.
a whole heart, like
Yeah.
you'll be more
So good.
Right.
more connected with the Lord, and then out of that, like you were saying, out of that flows the ministry of
yeah.
Christ. And I think that for me, that's been the only reason like that I've been able to do anything that
Yeah.
I've been really blessed to do,
So
is
good.
because like I've just asked the Lord, like keep healing me, keep
Yeah.
healing me, and I keep pursuing it, and it's not an easy thing.
Yeah.
Like to
Right.
work through your stuff is not
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I feel like it's just like such an amazing space of relationship with the Lord, and then when
Right.
as people see your freedom, they desire that
Yeah.
same freedom in
Yeah.
Christ. And
So
so I feel like that would be like, if I had a message for the rest of my life, it would be like, it'd be
Yeah.
like just to seek the healing that
Yeah.
Christ has offered to
Yeah.
us,
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
you know, through the blood of Christ.
Yeah.
Like we get to walk into a freedom and a grace and a mercy that
So
we
good.
could never know on our own. And so,
good.
and then to couple that, I would say like learn how to pray, because I feel like through prayer,
Yes.
your heart is made known.
Yes. Yeah.
Like you're aware of the things inside of your
Right.
heart, which produces
Yes.
your road to healing.
Yes.
So
Yes. So
and
good.
even like as you go on and you get married and even with children,
Yeah.
like the prayer is the only thing that sustains
right.
you,
Amen.
because you
Right.
can't control
Amen.
anything in your life,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
can't control
Right.
the people you lead.
Yeah.
And so
Amen.
prayer is the
Come on.
sustainability
Amen.
that you
Yeah.
need as a leader.
Yes.
And as a woman, I think sometimes we can get tossed into that role of like, will you pray? You know, but actually I really believe that that was
come
God.
on.
Like
Yeah.
God made Eve to be the protector of Adam.
Yes,
Like
yeah.
he took her from he took her from his rib, which protects
Right.
the heart.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
we
Come
as
on.
women
Come on.
protect
Yeah,
the
come
heart
on. Yeah.
of Christ by praying and being that
honor.
that
Yeah.
honor. Yeah,
So
exactly.
good.
So,
So good.
That's good.
anyway,
Good.
that's what I would say.
That's great. Come on, round it out.
All right, I would say find out who you are. Find out who Christ says you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then once you find that out, don't compare it to anybody else.
Right.
Good word.
Right.
Do not
That's so
compare.
good.
Right.
Everyone is unique. Nobody's is
Yes.
better.
Yeah.
Nobody's
Yes.
is more qualified.
Amen.
It's
Amen.
uniquely to what God's called you to be. And then to add on to that, to say yes to whatever it is.
Right. That's
Because a
good.
lot of
Good.
times God will tell us something and we hold on to it for like 16 years.
Yep.
So say yes,
true.
no matter how wild or crazy or you
Yeah.
don't feel qualified or called
So
or you
good.
don't have the resources, just say yes.
Yeah.
That's
Amen.
good. Good. Well,
Amen.
let me finish this off by saying, if you're a man listening to this or watching this, you know, it's in your best interest to look to the women in your life and to learn from them, whether it's your mother, your sister, your wife, whatever it is, that you guys carry something that's so kingdom. And it's foolish for any man to think that he doesn't need a woman or a strong woman in his life. So I'm thankful for every one of you women here for doing this, but also for leading well in ministry and helping to reshape the way we think of women, because it's such a God kingdom thing. God created women to be leaders and to be expressive in the way that you are, as opposed to the way man is. And together, I believe we give a full representation of the body of Christ and the kingdom of God. So thank you for spending time today. And it was good, right?
Great.
Did we do good?
Good.
Everybody happy?
Yeah.
Okay, good.